the harvest.
Good afternoon to you, Africa. This is Imene Nouad with the latest news from across the continent and the world. Algeria's parliament voted today on a draft law criminalizing colonialism, a move described by MPs as a historic. Lawmakers framed December as a month of sacrifice and national unity, praised President Abdelmajid Tebboune as the people's choice, and reaffirmed loyalty to November resolution and the martyrs. The debate also highlights calls for apology and reparations, solidarity with Palestine, Gaza, and Western Sahara, and Algeria's continued commitment to sovereignty and resistance. On this newly drafted law, Algeria's parliamentary representative Saad Barija explains to Abdurrahman Mahtal.
One of the most important of projects is the law of the criminalization of colonialism. This law is the most significant legislation of the current parliamentary term. It comprises 27 legal articles divided into 5 chapters, which cover the criminalization of colonialism, the criminal colonial acts, the specification of the number and types of crimes committed, and concludes with calls for reparation, acknowledgement, official apology, and compensation, including restitution for public funds seized in 1830 from the National Treasury.
Algerian Secretary of State for African Affairs Salma Bakhta Mansouri received former Ghanaian political activist Abdoulaye Mamed Barak during his visit to Algeria as part of a continent-wide tour promoting freedom of movement and people-to-people exchange across Africa. The meeting underscores Africa's shared commitment to solidarity and unity. Barak reaffirms the right of Sahrawi refugees to self-determination and included the delivery of a message addressed to President Abdelmajid Tebboune. Let's hear this small part of his speech.
I took the opportunity to visit the camps, which is being inhabited by our brothers and sisters from Western Sahara. And I must tell you that the issue of Western Sahara is an issue that I am passionate about. Is an issue that all of us as Africans should be passionate about. Western Sahara is a founding member of the African Union. It is the only colony, so to speak, right now that needs, to be liberated.
The Polisario Front representative at the United Nations denounces what he calls Morocco's mispresentation of Security Council Resolution 2797. He reiterates that the resolution does not recognize Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. The diplomat stresses the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination under international law. Nearly 1,000 days into the conflict in Sudan, the humanitarian crisis is deepening and calls for peace are growing louder. The United Nations warns that the need remains overwhelming, particularly in Darfur, as aid agencies struggle to reach those most at risk. At the same time, international partners are stepping up support to address food shortages in the wider region. Widad Alawa explains.
These rates are call for predictable, sustainable, and adequate funding for ANSOM and Somali National Forces at this critical juncture. The chronic underfunding of ANSOM seriously impedes its objective and risks reversing the progress achieved. Undermining the security gains over the years would have their implications for Somalia and the region. In conclusion, the A3 Plus expresses appreciation to all partners supporting Somalia's security and its path towards sustainable peace and development. We reaffirm our commitment to Somalia's sovereignty, unity, territorial integrity, and political independence.
The World Food Program appeals for $67 million in emergency funding to assist displaced population in eastern DRC. Authorities say nearly 28 million people now face acute food insecurity driven by conflict and loss of livelihood. Humanitarian access to rebel-held areas remain a major challenge. Algeria's parliament also approves on a new law on electronic trust services and digital identification. Algerian Minister of Post and Telecommunications Sid Ali Zarrouqi says the legislation strengthens the country's digital transformation, boosts cybersecurity, and gives full legal recognition to electronic documents and contracts. The law also creates a national authority for electronic certification and aims to support a secure and sustainable digital economy. Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko urges citizens to embrace entrepreneurship as a driver of national development. Speaking in Diamandio, he reaffirms government support for innovation and youth-led initiatives. The message comes during a competition focused on modernizing public services. Africa is at a turning point as it heads into 2026, caught between heavy reliance on global markets and growing push to trade more within the continent. New trade figures show both the scale of Africa's external dependence and the quiet gains being made through regional cooperation. Yasmin Ben Ashur takes a closer look at what's changing and what it could mean for Africa's economic future. Let's hear it.
Africa sits at a major economic turning point in 2025. Last year, the continent's total merchandise trade goods crossing borders, both within Africa and with the rest of the world, reached about 1.4 trillion United States dollars. Of that, roughly 1.2 trillion United Nations dollars went to and from partners outside Africa, like the European Union, China, and the United States, showing how much African economies still depend on global demand. But regional ties are strengthening. Thanks to the African Continental Free Trade Area, trade between African nations grew to about 208 United States dollars. In 2024, up by nearly 8%, from Algiers to Lagos and Nairobi. Markets are changing. Experts say better infrastructure, simpler customs, and digital systems like the Pan-African payment and settlement system can boost internal trade. The shift is about resilience, self-reliance, and Africa shaping its own future.
Nearly 1,000 days into the conflict in Sudan, and the humanitarian crisis is deepening and calls for peace are growing louder. The United Nations warns that the need remains overwhelming, particularly in Darfur, as aid agencies struggle to reach those most at risk. At the same time, international partners are stepping up to support address food shortages in the wider region. Widad Alawa explains.
Within nearly 1,000 days of conflict in Sudan, the urgency for peace has reached unprecedented levels. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says a comprehensive and lasting ceasefire is now more critical than ever. The UN Humanitarian Agency notes that the humanitarian needs remain immense across Darfur as efforts continue to secure safe and sustained access to Al-Fashir. Whereas in response to ongoing humanitarian needs in the region, the World Food Programme has welcomed a $12.5 million donation from the Nigerian government to address urgent food shortages in South Sudan. In a statement, WFP assures the funding will support the delivery of life-saving food assistance to the country's most vulnerable people, strengthen community resilience, and sustain essential humanitarian services. While humanitarian aid remains a vital lifeline, the United Nations stresses that lasting peace is urgently needed to enable Sudanese communities not only to survive, but to rebuild and thrive.
Concluding this harvest with the sports ahead of Algeria's opening match against Sudan at the Africa Cup of Nations, Algerian supporters gather in large numbers. Fans arrive from Algeria and abroad, displaying strong support for their national team. Algeria plays Sudan this Wednesday afternoon. Thank you for your full attention to this harvest. It was directed by Muad Bab Ahmed, observed by Tawas Control Board with Imad, and streaming with Rania and Riyadh. Thank you all for your dedication. Until our next time, this is Imene Nouad tuning out with the voice